So I don't mean to scare you, but let me just put up a slide here. You ready? Here's some accent rules. Here they are. Way too many of them. 10 accent rules for your viewing pleasure. I'll put that up for a minute and let you just take a glance at it without talking. Okay, so now you've seen the accent rules. Don't worry, you don't have to memorize them. But we are going to look at some of these with our student, especially if we think it's going to help them as we get on to longer words. So, just in terms of generalizing this a little bit, there tend to be patterns. For example, when you have a noun that's 2 syllables long, often the first accent is going to be the one with the stress. Think about climate or knowledge. The first syllable has the accent. Same with 2 syllable adjectives. Often it's going to be the first syllable with the accent, like flippant or spacious. I bet you didn't know that, but it is true for many, many words. The last syllable can be the one that gets the accent for many 2-syllable verbs. We saw that with produce, right? Produce, accent on the first syllable, tends to be a noun. Produce. And now produce as the verb, accent on the second and last syllable. So when we see a 2-syllable word with the accent on the last syllable, we know it's often an action. And that's a great time also to make sure your student knows about verbs, nouns, and adjectives. Same with words that end in ic. So, for example, ecstatic, geographic, that is a suffix, and we're going to put the accent on the syllable right before it. So, geographic has the graph, or ecstatic has the stat. That's where that accent is. So, second to last syllable, because the ic, we don't want to stress that. Ic, right? Doesn't need any stress. Similar in words that end in S-I-O-N or T-I-O-N, those shun words, which is another thing you go over in level 2, the syllable right before them is often the one with the accent. So extension, retribution, it's the one right before the shun. Hopefully I'm not scaring you with all these rules, but it does help our students to know the generalizations. And you don't have to go over them all at the same time. You can slowly move through them and look at some examples together. Now, if we get into some even longer words, often it'll be the third from the last syllable, so not the last, not the second to last, but the third from the last, when we see words that end in CY, like democracy, or TY, like uncertainty, PHY, remember our new digraph PH, like geography, and GY, like radiology. And the last pattern that I just want to pull out for you to notice right now is when we have words that end in AL. So for example, exceptional, critical. We tend to have the accent on the third from the last syllable for whatever reason. We're definitely not going to emphasize the AL. That would be way boring. And the whatever it is, the second syllable before the AL, because these are, again, adjectives, so we know that it's going to have that many syllables. Somehow my brain knows that. Am I just making that up? So that's the third from the last. Okay. That's where we're going to leave it with accent rules. If this is something that you get to with your student, you can review it further
and learn it together with them. I just wanted to give you an idea of the kinds of things you might go over in level 2 with a student who needs that focus on accent rules.
Okay, so congratulations. We're almost through our time with Module 2. We're not pulling out every single skill in Module 2. That would just simply take too long. And the truth is, once you get through all of, I'm sorry, not Module 2, Level 2 in Orton Gillingham approach, once you get through all of Level 1, you are going to have the skills to take a look at, any of these pieces and present it to your student, practice it with your student, and review it with your student, and have your student be successful at making that an automatic skill for their decoding, bringing their reading level higher and higher. So it may not feel like that's the truth now, but it's just, for anything, practice makes perfect, and you will be a practice tutor by the time you're in level 2. But I wanted to point this out to you. Part of the reason it's important to look at those accent rules, which you did in just last module, is that sometimes where the accent falls is going to help us determine what sound the vowel makes in a word. So take a look. Here we can see there's closed syllables and open syllables, and whether or not they're accented is often going to impact what sound they make. Let me give you some examples. So the word cancel, for example, my favorite show is, well, I can't say that in the right tense. I don't want to cancel this training. That the emphasis there is on the can, it's on the first syllable. And I know that when it's a closed syllable like that, can, right? That has the in at the end, it's a closed syllable, and it has the accent on it, that tends to be a short vowel. We looked at that with closed syllable with one syllable words. The one syllable is always the one with the emphasis, cat, dog, those. And so that's why we tend to say that closed syllables are going to have that short vowel sound. But sometimes we have closed syllables without an accent. For example, carrot and president. Here we have a closed syllable, right? Ut of carrot has a T at the end. It should make ah. That O should say ah for octopus. But it's a schwa O because there's no accent on that part of the word. President. We don't usually say president. And actually, yeah, so it's an ID. You'd put the division after the D, and you wouldn't say id, you'd say president. And I think it's just because as we speak, we tend to speak quickly through those non-accented syllables, turning that sound into an Um, we're just so eager to pronounce it exactly right. So this is a place where once we know where the stress is on a word, once we know the accent is, it may help us to figure out how to pronounce it. And if we can pronounce it correctly, we may jog our auditory memory and have a time when we've heard that word and can think, oh, it must mean this, that's exactly the kind of experience we want to trigger for our students. Now with open syllables, it's a little bit different. That's where we tend to say that open syllables express the long vowel sound, right? Go, she. If you can think of lots of open syllable words that are just one syllable because that has the accent. We have that long vowel sound with our open syllables. Think about our example word of tiger when we saw that, how we divide after the I and before the G, right? If we know tiger, that open syllable has the accent, right? We don't say tiger, we say tiger. So we have an open syllable with an accent, tiger, and we know it's a long vowel. That just tends to be the pattern. This is why in your brain, as you divide up the syllables, you kind of know how to pronounce them because we have these generalizations. Sorry about that. But if you can think of an example where there is not an accent, for example, an open syllable that's not accent. So think about the word deter, right? I think you might want to deter me from talking about this too long. In that case, it's not deter, so the accent is on the ter, on the second syllable. The open syllable D it tends to be a schwa. We don't always say detour, we say deter with an deter. So I hope I didn't just tangle you up more, but there are some patterns that are going to help us pronounce our words as we know accent rules. So let's talk a little bit about decoding, because now that we have all the pieces, we have all the syllable types, We have the accent rules. We have a whole bunch of knowing which blends and vowels tend to go together. Now we can really talk about decoding almost any word we come up with, right? The only thing that might help us a little more is to have gone over prefixes and suffixes maybe a little bit more. But I want to talk about the steps of decoding. This is actually in the beginning of your binder. It's on page 12 of our materials because it's such an important Orton Gillingham skill. It's one of the kind of staples here. But let's go through this. So we're going to take a word and we're going to write it down on our whiteboard or our notebook paper, right? And then we're going to go through and find all the vowels and all the consonants and label them. So here's this wonderful word of trigonometry. Such a great word. And so you're going to go through and mark. T has a C for consonant, R has a C for consonant, I has a V for vowel, G has a C for consonant, O has, and so on, right? Now we're going to look at the syllable division patterns. And we're going to go syllable by syllable so that we don't get too overwhelmed, or our students for that matter. So now that you know where the consonants and the vowels are, we can look for those patterns, right? Step one, we've analyzed the whole word, checked out where the vowels and consonants are, tried to find some syllable division patterns. We're actually going to spend a lot of time with blending skills. In this case, trigonometry. Where do you think the first division is going to happen? It's going to happen after the G, right? It's a closed syllable, so we kind of know that that's probably going to go together. What we can do to help our student break this down, because we're going to kind of tend to do it automatically, and it's hard to break down the skills you know automatically, is you can circle, look, it's a vowel, a consonant, vowel, consonant. Probably we're going to have another syllable in there, and we already learned trigonometry, right? We know kind of the area where the syllable is going to fall. So if we circle this little area here, we're going to know that somewhere in there is where you divide, right? It might be after the I, it might be after the G, but probably not after that. And now we're going to find the line of separation. Where do you think it is? Trigonometry. I hear a closed syllable, do you? So let's do it after the G. We'll divide it right there. And now we know that that's a closed syllable. Now you might say that's kind of like a, that's a kind of a loop explanation there, but we don't keep in mind for our student who maybe has never heard this word, we're just seeing this word, long word. I don't know if it's trigonometry or trigonometry. So it's also about helping our student not be afraid to do some trial and error to find the right places for the divisions. Now we want to look at the blending. So trigonometry actually does not have that many blends. It has some TR blends, right? So we know those TRs are common blends, and we're going to know that we don't want to divide them. So for example, the last syllable, trigonometry, we are going to keep it that T and the R together. We want to put a caret mark under the letters and say each sound. So for example, if I'm having trouble with that TR blend, I can go tr and remember from all the time I've spent with my tutor figuring out those blends in those blending drills we've done every week, that I'm going to put those together. And then we basically complete a blending drill in the middle of that word. And then we're going to look at where the accents fall. We're going to identify the vowel sound using the accenting rules and mark that vowel sound and say it aloud. Now, definitely part of this is semantics. What does that word mean? So after we figure out how to say it, we might want to look it up in the dictionary or just talk about it and not miss that opportunity if we've been working with this word and decoding it. What is that word? And find out what it is. And then we can cover up parts of it and look at how to spell those parts, kind of a guessing game if you want to play with your students. Just using the sounds, if I cover up that TRY at the end, can my student remember and figure out trigonometry? That's not a double E, that's a Y. And then being able to cover the whole word and respell it, that would be pretty impressive, right? And also having the student write the word. So I'm using those motor skills to review it as well. So those are the steps of decoding. Those are the things that we can do in our decoding time with students. The important thing is breaking up the different skills to divide the syllables, because that's really where the struggling happens. And then after we've broken up the word, to be able to blend the consonant blends together or any vowel teams together so that we can figure out what they all say. So that's a really kind of difficult thing to talk about without using a whole bunch of examples. But as you keep doing this, I think it will make a lot more sense and you'll actually end up doing it just naturally. So, and if you really want to see this done well, I'm going to put a link to a video here so that you can go through the entire steps of decoding a word with someone who's not a novice like me.